we recently had the opportunity to test out this amazing camera from AJA through the CION program. I'm going to tell you a little bit about our experience with it. The first thing I noticed about this camera is its global shutter. It's really awesome because you don't get the rolling shutter skews that you see in other cameras, but it also has a trade-off because the dynamic range seems a little limited, and I found it pretty difficult to not clip the highlights. There's a lot of things I love about this camera, especially at the price point, but there are a few little things that I'd like to see changed. One of those things is the histogram. I found it to be not immediately obvious of even what it was, because it doesn't just show you where the whites clip and where the blacks clip. It shows you a lot of information to the left and right. There's probably some sort of scientific reason of what's being measured off the sensor, but I really don't care as a cinematographer about those things. All I want to know is where I'm clipping. AJA's included this side monitor right here, and it does display a video image of what you're shooting, but for things like exposure or focus or even just judging the quality of the shot, I found that to be pretty useless. What I did find helpful was being able to access the menus and see my settings. The question I have is, why not just let that stuff take up the entire screen? When we were out shooting, I noticed that the highlights were clipping pretty fast, and in order to help me with the exposure, I actually went into the exposure menu and I found a gamma setting, and there was video, normal expanded, and expanded one. Expanded one seemed to give me the most dynamic range and that kind of film log looking image. What wasn't immediately obvious to me is that there's actually another setting in the camera that affects the look of how your image is recorded. That's found under the white balance menu, out of all places, in a color correction setting, and there's different modes. There's video, normal, skin tones, and flat. If you're going to do any sort of post grading, I highly recommend that you use the flat setting. When color correcting footage shot with expanded 1 gamma, I noticed the blue channel was significantly more lifted than the red or green channels. I assume AJA did this in order to keep the blue channel clean after correction, since blue is typically the noisiest channel. I used the Color Finale plugin in Final Cut Pro 10 to create a look for my CION footage, and I saved it as an effects preset so I could apply it to other clips. Internally, this shoots to ProRes, and it can shoot up to 60 frames a second. However, if you're set to ProRes 444 and you jump up to 60 frames a second, the camera automatically bumps the codec down to 422. Another feature is the ability to do time-lapse shots. Now, I would have expected to find this in the frame rate menu. However, it was actually in the configure menu where I could enable interval recording. A really neat feature about this camera is you can actually control it over a network, say on a laptop. And this is especially helpful for things like renaming the clips. You could have an assistant doing that on a laptop, which frees up the camera operator. And frankly, it's not really that easy to name clips through a little dial-in knob. Whereas on a laptop, that can be a couple clicks and it's super simple. Built into the side of the camera are 2 full-size XLR inputs, and they're pretty great. I mean, they have phantom power, and I tested it out with the shotgun mic. I got okay results, but I would still prefer to use a separate audio mixer for recording. When I put the card in, I noticed a nice little warning on the top of the camera that says, "Don't pull your media if it's being accessed." So then I thought, how do I get this card out? Do I power down? And I realized that, oh, right over here, AJA has included a nice little eject button. So hit that button and unmount your media safely. Overall, I was really impressed with the images we were able to get from this camera. The ergonomics were great. It really impressed people who were passing by and seeing this camera out in the wild. My main complaints could mostly be addressed through firmware updates. So I'd like to thank AJA for letting us try this camera out, and I encourage you to consider it on a production.